some sticky natural resource issues. And in the energy program, we work directly with communities across the state. And the goal is really to empower communities to take control of their own energy, to reconsider how they think about energy, how they consume energy, how they generate energy, how they distribute energy, and all with the goal of building a variety of clean energy economies across the state of Oregon. So we lead a coalition called Making Energy Work for Rural Oregon. This is a growing coalition across Oregon. It's made up of community organizations, cities, counties, ranchers, farmers, everyone in between. And it's really a diverse makeup of folks that are all pursuing their own clean energy projects or programs. And so the network really serves as a shared space for these different entities to come together, share resources, best practices, lessons learned. It's an opportunity to leverage investment. It's an opportunity to build a collective rural voice on energy policy in Salem and Washington, D.C. We host, as part of this network, a yearly fall energy symposium. So we just had one a few weeks back in Bend, Oregon. They're always at different locations. This is one we have here before in Hood River. It's actually at Frame Brewery, which the event doesn't entirely take place at a brew pub, but it's usually a small part of the event. And in addition to the yearly energy symposium, we also host in the spring or early summer a 2-day spring energy field tour. So this was us in Lake County 2 years ago at a geothermal station. These are really fun events. We don't yet know the location for the next spring energy tour, but if you're interested in joining, we'd love to have you, and I can plug you into our network later. In addition to the events, we host quarterly calls. We have rotating guest speakers, and there's usually a small policy component in each call. So that's the network. And I'm here to talk a little bit about community solar. My hope is to provide a little context as to what this model is, why it's forming and taking place all across different states across the United States, talk a little bit about the program that's been determined here in Oregon, and I hope I can provide a few lessons and tips if anyone here is interested in participating in a future project, or if you're actually interested in pursuing your own project. So when we think about community solar, something that really always kind of is top of mind to me is choice and access. So we've been, I think there's many, this is a really interesting time to be working in the energy space, not just in Oregon, but in the US. We're seeing really rapidly transforming market structures with utilities, with energy companies, and what we're seeing is kind of an explosion of distributed energy resources. Instead of having these large power plants far away that are generating power and shipping it to homes and businesses, we're starting to see a lot of different local energy projects spring up. And what this is doing is creating a lot of opportunity for communities to really take control of their own energy. And part of this is because we have really not had a whole lot of control or access in terms of where energy comes from, where it's generated, and when we turn the light on, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So with community solar, let me see what the next one is. There's been a lot of growth in the solar market, but there's also been a lot of communities that have been left behind. There's a lot of rural communities, underserved communities, low and middle income communities, a variety of residents that really haven't been able to participate in the solar market. So there's some really smart folks in Oregon and across the US that are trying to figure out what are those barriers and how can we overcome them. And as a result, we're starting to see some really interesting models come to light to bring solar to new customers. Can you see this in the back is a little fuzzy? Okay. I'll be able to share the presentation after if you want to take a look at any of these slides. So some of these models will have, at the top left, this is like a group purchasing program. I don't know, has anyone here heard of a Solarize program before? I don't think Basin counts in these questions. So for a Solarize campaign, we saw this, it actually started in Portland in 2009. It essentially is a bulk purchase discount campaign where a group of neighbors or community comes together, they all pony up and they go solar together, and they're able to access this bulk purchase discount and receive those panels for a discounted rate, and it's usually for a limited time. So through the solarized model, you're still seeing some of that, but not so much in Oregon. Down below, on-site shared solar, there's a lot of folks trying to figure out how to put solar on multifamily housing facilities and how the residents can actually access some of the benefits of those panels. In the bottom right, community-driven financial models, and these are all really, really general. This is more of like a crowdsourced campaign. A good example in Oregon is the Oregon Clean Power Cooperative, where you have a group of many different community investors that pool together and finance a project that's typically on a public facility, but they're not receiving the actual energy generated, they're just kind of crowdsourced investors. And what I'm here to talk about tonight is this top right one, which is offsite shared solar. So it's a group of subscribers or owners that pool together for an off-site shared solar project. Could be on-site as well. Let's see. So who cares? Why does this matter? There's just been a lot of barriers for a lot of new customers to access solar. A lot of homeowners, you might not have adequate roof space for a project. You might have not the ideal south-facing or south-sloping rooftop. Maybe you've got a giant tree you love and you wouldn't want to cut it down. It's shading your home. Perhaps you're a renter like me, and there's very little incentive for me to put solar on a home I don't own. Upfront financing is a chronic barrier for folks to enter the solar market. It's still a heavy investment. So how can we build models that increase access to solar for majority of folks that have so far been left out? I already missed all my notes. I'm not sure where I am anymore. Yes, so the intent behind this model really is to get at some of those traditional barriers around financing, around limited space and availability. This model also provides new opportunities for public facilities that have been harder to finance solar projects. They don't have the tax appetite. And so for schools, churches, libraries, this has been a hurdle for them to access solar. In Oregon, we used to have a residential energy tax credit. So this was a tax credit available to homeowners that put solar on their own residential rooftop. The Oregon legislature let that sunset in 2017, and as a result, in many cases, the years it'll take to pay off your system has increased because that tax credit is gone. So shared solar is a good opportunity for homeowners to pool their resources together and through the economies of scale be able to put together an off-site shared solar project and still reap those benefits. And then for businesses, there's many incentives to participate in a program. I think part of that is around the idea of certainty and stability with your energy costs. So by participating in a project, you're essentially locking in your energy costs for the duration of your contract. And for a business, there could be volatile energy prices, or could be, generally speaking, energy costs are going up. So there's a little bit of certainty there that could be an incentive to participate. So these are all very kind of general forms of community solar. In Oregon, we didn't have a program until 2016. So that year, the Oregon legislature passed what is known as Senate Bill 1547, and part of that legislation enabled a community solar program here in the state. Before then, you could not take your meter and say, I want to be a part of this project down the road. And now, because of this program, you now have that opportunity. So I'm going to take a few minutes and just talk about some of the basics of the program as it's been defined here in Oregon. And one thing I will note, the program has not yet launched. So even though the legislation was passed in 2016, it's gone through a pretty lengthy rulemaking process with the Oregon Public Utility Commission. And they've defined several elements of the program. We're really excited because it's about to launch. We're expecting it to launch in about 2019, hopefully early 2019. So this is a really good time to start thinking about community solar for you or your community. Let's see. So the basic tenet in the legislation in Oregon is that you can be an owner or a subscriber of a project, and together you share the costs and benefits associated with that solar array. The legislation, when it was written, was pretty skeletal. There wasn't a whole lot of other information in there, So that's partly why it's taken so long for this program to get defined. And believe it or not, it's just been a really lengthy process to engage a variety of stakeholders in terms of balancing different interests and understandings to make this program really successful. So some of the basics of the program, I'm not going to go backward. Some of the things that we do know right now is that the program is limited to all customers that are in investor-owned utility areas. So in Oregon, that means Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, and there's a small part in Northeast Oregon and Idaho Power. So you have to be one of those customers to participate. And if you build a project in Pacific Power territory, you can only have customers that reside in Pacific Power territory, and same with Portland General Electric. There's a pretty wide range in project sizes. It can be as small as 25 kilowatts and all the way up to 3 megawatts. And another sideboard that they put in place to ensure that this was keeping in the spirit of community, you have to have at least 5 customers for your project. You can't have fewer than that. And not one customer may take off more than 40% of an individual project. I think this was partly to put in place that you don't have, say, maybe a large industrial customer coming in, building a project, taking 99% of it, giving away 1% and calling it community. And then to ensure that we have some space for residential customers, small commercial, they have a carve out for those customers as well. And then in Oregon, we haven't seen this in other community solar programs in other states, but we went so far as to say that across the entire program, 10% of the program must be made available to low-income customers. And that really gets at the heart of part of what this model is trying to accomplish, is increasing access to, frankly, folks that have been left behind in the solar market. So as a customer, if you were to participate in a project, you would essentially, as a subscriber, each month be paying a small subscription fee and then receiving a bill credit rate. And you'll still receive a utility, your same utility bill that you get each month. And so here would be Pacific Power. You'll still receive the same Pacific Power bill each month, but you'll see a line item for a subscription rate, just what you're paying into the project, and a bill credit rate. So they created a lot of flexibility with the program to be an owner or a subscriber. If you're an owner, then you can buy into a project, you can own a share of the project. Of course, that's more of an upfront investment, but then you see your savings down the road. With a subscriber model, you can pay as you go. So there's no upfront financing. You pay, that's where the subscription fee comes in each month, and then you have access to that project throughout its lifetime. And the PUC decided that the rate at which you would be receiving there's an actual value associated with the generation from that project is equal to the residential retail rate. And essentially what that means is it would be the same value as if you were to put solar on your own rooftop as a homeowner. So we're seeing, I think, oh yes, I can find the same value. Yeah, so if you're a homeowner and you put solar on your rooftop, the value that you receive from your utility for that generation is the residential retail rate. It's about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And so the PUC has determined that by participating in a community solar project, that value will be the same as if you were a residential customer putting solar on your own roof.
So if I want to put solar on my home, do I still have to pay Pacific Power?
So if you're a homeowner,
I can't go without, I can't be off the grid?
Yes, so this is a good question. So by participating in a program, if you have solar on your rooftop, regardless of, if you just have solar and the grid goes down, your power goes down as well because you are tied to the grid. Unless you have storage or battery backup on your system, you won't be off grid. So even if you have solar, I think a common misconception is that if you have solar on your rooftop and Cascadia strikes and the power goes down, even though you have solar, your power is going to be turned off as well, unless you have battery backup.
And how much are those? Are they super expensive?
That's a good question. That could take up an entirely different presentation. The cost, like solar panels, the cost of batteries have gone down dramatically, but we're not yet seeing a kind of a rapid deployment of batteries in the residential market, and it varies wildly. Batteries are kind of a new game in town, or at least they've been around for a little while, but I think it's starting to catch on a lot more. But depending on the battery, the size, what you're interested in using it for, whether that's battery backup, if power goes down, or demand charges and peak shaving, it really depends. It just, all of this really depends on the system. But in terms of just putting solar on your roof, you would still be participating with your utility as you would if you don't have solar.
I didn't know that. You
Well,
still,
this, go ahead.
yeah, well, go ahead.
I just want to say this bill was written, the bill that allows us with the cooperation of those three power companies. And so that, the Senate, they begin to see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, you still somehow cooked into,
You're gonna still pay Pacific Power.
that's crazy. So that it's important to include those batteries in the program. And, I mean, I don't know if this exists, but I've had this idea for years. I might be feeling like $1 million idea here. But, so for example, I pay $150 a month in my energy. That's $15,000 in 10 years, $30,000 in 20. Are there any partnerships with banking or finance institutions where they know how much I pay? They would give me the $30,000 upfront to do all this, and then I would maybe pay this for 20 years or however long, and be done with it and they own it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different opportunities to just own the system outright. And a lot of lenders, and I think this is a space where lenders are far more comfortable in clean energy lending than they have been maybe 15, 20 years ago. The science is, and the technology has been tested and trusted, so people know solar delivers. So there's certainly a lot of different financing opportunities now as a homeowner to finance system. And you can also work with a lot of solar contractors, developers that will, you could work it out, and some contractors offer this, and Jennifer could probably speak to this better than I could, but they could work directly with you on financing that project. So I'll just say that for community solar in particular, I think what we're probably going to see is a lot of projects coming in. You'll see a lot of developers coming in, and they will build a project, and then they'll look for subscribers, and that's great. The role that Sustainable Northwest has been playing is a little bit different. We see a lot of value in communities, community organizations, cities, counties. We work primarily in rural communities to have kind of a community-led project and design it so that you really start to ensure maximum community benefit through that project. And so we have been working with a variety of counties and entities across the state, even though the program has yet to launch, because there are still things that you can do today to prepare and start to build your project. So I'm not a developer. Jennifer can probably answer a lot of the more technical questions for you, but we do have some suggestions if folks would like to not more than just participate in a project, but maybe even spearhead your own. So one thing I will say is that community solar in some regards will look like many other solar projects, many of the same considerations. You still need to think about financing, how you're going to finance your project. You need to think about location and identifying an appropriate site for that project. You need to think about where that project will tie into the grid, the point of interconnection. So some of those will be similar. What I think will be really different with community solar is we're going to start to see some really interesting and creative ownership and subscriber structures. So just in the experience we've had in the past year supporting a lot of our partners on the ground, we're seeing a variety of different projects kind of bubble up. And one is this neighborhood project. So the smallest project size you can do a community solar is 25 kilowatts. Typically for your average household, if you were to put solar on your own rooftop, you're going to see a project around the size between 2 and 5 kilowatts or so. So you could pool together just some of your neighbors. Maybe the Johnsons down the road have a few acres that they wouldn't mind putting solar on. We could pool those resources and build your own neighborhood project. In the rules, you can't have more than, one entity cannot offtake more than 40% of a project. And I think what we're anticipating is that a lot of projects will have a larger subscriber off-taking a substantial portion of that project, so we're calling that an anchor tenant. So in the communities we're working with, we're encouraging them to think about who could be that anchor tenant, who's a large energy consumer in your community. In one community, it's the hospital that we're working with that will be the large off-taker. In another, it'll be the county. So thinking about different commercial users in the area that might be interested in the anchor tenant role. And it's really, it's good to think about having someone be the large off-taker, so you have some stability over kind of the subscription and so you're not having too many people come in and out of the project. And then a lot of small commercial opportunities. We'll see a lot of small local businesses that are interested in being able to green up their energy mix, but also be able to promote their sustainability practices. We're working with a variety of agricultural producers, thinking about dairies, farmers, ranchers, nurseries, irrigation districts, and then always thinking about the low-income component, that 10% carve-out. So we've been actively working with a variety of low-income providers across the state to make sure that we understand those barriers and how to communicate and reach low-income and vulnerable communities. Sorry, I just put that in there. So a few things, and I can share some notes, and I do have some handouts that compile some of this information. But site selection is really important. There's kind of a growing discussion in the state about appropriate solar siting, and it's good to think about these issues and get in front of them. So depending on, if you have a small roof space, you could possibly do a rooftop project, but the majority will be seeing ground-mounted systems. Typically, you want to allocate about 5 acres for every 1 megawatt of solar, so best practice. And then also thinking about where that project could be tied into the transmission. It can get a little wonky, but line capacity is a real issue, especially here in Southern Oregon. Lake County has a lot of solar coming on, but they're actually hitting some walls in terms of how much power they can put onto the grid. Line capacity is getting constrained down there. So we're looking at, when we're siting projects, we're looking at locations that are about 1 to 2 miles from a substation. And so some of these considerations are important. Of course, environmental considerations. I would never get behind any project that cuts down a lot of large, beautiful trees to build solar on it. We also have to consider wetlands, floodplains, and floodways. All of these are really important considerations. And of course, working with your county is the best first step in terms of any sort of zoning or land constrictions. And then site control is essentially saying you have the authority to build solar on a project. So we have developed through this experience a variety of handouts, tools, outreach materials, both for potential customers and subscribers, and also folks that are looking to perhaps develop their own project. We partnered with some graduate students at Portland State University last spring, and they built a GIS mapping tool where they essentially collected all of these different data layers that I just discussed, wetlands, floodplains, substation locations, pulled it all together into one tool. So communities can just take a look at this and start thinking about where an appropriate site could be for their project. Also, ODFW has a wonderful platform that you can nerd out on for hours called Compass. It's got a variety of biological layers. It's really interesting. It's free. Anyone can access that. Oregon State University also has the Oregon Explorer, which is similar. You can also nerd out on that for hours. It's awesome. And then if you really want to get into some of the details around interconnection and line capacity, here in Pacific Power Territory, they do have an online portal anyone can access called the Oasis. And this will essentially show you a list of potential projects in an interconnection queue. So these are projects that are in the process of going through an interconnection study and looking to get an interconnection agreement. And this will give you some gauge, possibly, if that substation is going to be tapped out. It will not bypass an interconnection study or agreement, but is a good starting place and gives you a little bit of an idea of how much solar is coming online in your area. And then, of course, always working with your county and Oregon Land Conservation and Development Commission is a good place to start in terms of zoning. I thought I had a So I think that's it for now. I will happily take any questions. I'll make some handouts available for folks. That really focuses on kind of a subscription customer experience guide. But with that being said, any questions? Yeah.
That GIS mapping tool, could anybody get a hold of that?
Yeah, so you would have to reach out to us, and then we'll send you the link that you need to access that. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bridget.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. My name is Jen Nuda. Actually, Bridget and I are working together on a board for Solar Oregon, which is a nonprofit that supports solar education throughout the state. So we get a chance to hang out together up in Portland, too. I live out in Astoria, which is probably about as far away as you can get from Klamath Falls and still be in Oregon. It was a great drive to come down. I have a consulting firm, and I normally support very large solar, storage, or transmission projects. I moved up here about 4 years ago and found that Oregon was just on the cusp of going from 1, 2, 3, 4 megawatt projects to much larger projects to support data centers for Facebook, or the kind of projects that are big enough that the utilities that Bridget mentioned can actually purchase that power and use it to replace other power sources. And that's important to me as a ratepayer, because I would love to see the power companies choose solar over building a new gas plant to replace coal that's retiring. So I was very excited to move up here and find out there was an opportunity for me to help with much larger projects. So what I told Nick I'd Ignite was talk a little about things I've been working on, from large solar to large storage, and then also who are these off-takers who are going to buy that much power. So I have 3 different projects I will talk about tonight. As a consultant, I end up on kind of the cutting edge of what's going on in the market, because that's who's calling me asking for help. So I'm excited to say that Oregon is building larger solar. It's in the works. It'll take several years. But even on this side of the Cascades, up in Christmas Valley, south of Bend, we're seeing one of the largest projects Oregon's ever seen proposed, 600 megawatts by a company called Obsidian, and they're trying to get that off the ground with their permitting. So that's really exciting. So 600 megawatts, I mean, that's enormous. I'm working on a 1 gigawatt project down in northern Arizona, and that's like, you're talking about a few acres. We're talking about several square miles. So a completely different scale of project. And that has its own challenges, of course, but it's exciting to see Oregon be able to be in that market, build solar projects of that size. And people originally thought, Oregon solar, this can't work, it rains all the time. But like you mentioned, and Klamath Falls has plenty of sun, and the solar can be more efficient at cooler temperatures, as you students know. So I'm really looking forward to seeing bigger projects built here. And Klamath Falls already has some really exciting big things going. I did a little research. There's probably a dozen smaller storage projects that are, I mean not storage, but solar projects that are currently being developed in the area. And also, you're home to the Swan Lake North Pump Storage Project, which is probably no more than 10 miles northeast of here at Swan Lake. That just got its draft environmental impact statement out on the street, which is a very important step to getting that permitted through FERC. So we're going to see large storage available down in southern Oregon. When you have large storage, pump storage, that means you can have a lot of solar backed up and to go on the grid down here. So it's really exciting. So pump storage. Why is pump storage exciting? We all hear about Tesla batteries, and those are great, but you have to have a lot of them to back up a lot of solar. And you might want to take a look at the Swan Lake North draft impact statement to take a look at more what's going on with that. But basically, you have a couple of water reservoirs, either closed loop where you keep the same water going all the time, or open loop, more like a dam that's going to be now used for storage, and it essentially works as a water battery. You have, when power is expensive, then you run your power over your dam, and you make power, and when power is cheap, you pay to pump it back up to the higher reservoir. So you just keep operating that system. They just take quite a long time to permit, and up until about now, the regulatory environment has not been the right time to permit those and get those approved. But I know of at least 4 down in California that are in several stages of development, and then Swanland North is really exciting up here, already getting their anti-statement stage. And I'm working on one of those down in California, and depending on the off-taker and other environmental details, it could be between 400 megawatts and 1,200 megawatts, which is enormous for storage. So you can see how that could compare to maybe, you know, a stadium full of tractor trailers full of batteries. So the next thing in addition to storage would be who the off-taker might be. And here's an opportunity that I really see for the Klamath Falls areas is to encourage more companies that want to build data centers to site them down here. We're seeing that up in Prineville. Multiple companies are putting data centers up there. And even out where I live in Astoria, which is a small community, not unlike here, we're seeing data center development. A company called Agile from Southern California has just decided to go ahead and site their data center up in Warrenton in an area where they're building a little industrial park and may be able to have an offshore fiber optic cable come in. So we may end up with a nice little tech center up there that will fit really well with our little community college that we have and a growing professional group that's moving in with our hospital and other county offices. So I'm really excited about that. And certainly I'm encouraging them to power that data center with solar. And they say, hey, it's Astoria, it rains even more over here. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you can build a small solar project here, but then you can access other solar through contracts that's being produced throughout the state. So I hope we see more of that. People think outside the box, use the opportunity for solar and storage to encourage development in these smaller communities. And we're seeing it happen in Astoria. It can certainly do more here, especially when you have the college here and even more sun than we have. Right? So another thing I was really excited about was see that your school actually already has, 8,000 solar panels, and you already are being heated by geothermal. So you already have a school that obviously values renewables here. And I think that you guys are entering the job market at the perfect time. So one thing I want to talk a little about was what's going on to help you guys find jobs in the solar and storage market right now. How many of you guys are students? How do you have? Oh, awesome, whole room. So the Solar Oregon group that Bridget and I are part of has a sister organization called the Oregon Solar Industry Association. Are you guys familiar with that at all? I wasn't either until I moved here 4 years ago. But I went to their annual meeting a couple years ago, and they had 400 people show up in Portland. It was huge. And that meeting has not just information on utility scale solar, but tons of solar installers, engineering companies that come in, consultants. So this year, that meeting is going to be May 7th through 9th up in Portland at the Portland Crown Plaza, and highly encourage you guys to go because they have tons of workshops. There's great networking, opportunity to meet people who have jobs. And we do not have near enough people living in the state of Oregon right now to fill all the solar jobs that are needed over the next 20 years. So highly recommend you go check it out and learn about the areas you might be interested in participating in the job market, because I was blown away by how many people attended. About 4 years ago, OSEA said they had a very hard time recruiting enough board members. 2 years ago, they had like 30 people who wanted to be on the board. And part of the reason was they had all these solar companies and engineering companies that have moved in, and they want to be involved and help affect policy in the state that will encourage solar development. As you mentioned, that land use is a really big deal. When you have, 10, 20 acre parcel, people are a little less concerned about competing land uses and using up high quality farmland. When you're talking, 2 square miles, you have completely different concerns. Ranchers don't want to have a couple miles between them and their neighbor that are ranching, and you get concerns about wildlife corridors.